Rafi, I want to pick up, though, on whether or not what we're seeing right now in terms of higher oil prices will be transitory, which is what the U.S. Federal Reserve has suggested, or whether or not we really are at the beginning of a new super cycle. So, because we've talked about the supply side, which has been destructed over the past number of years. But one question there, at what point can the shale players in the United States pick up some of that slack, number one? And number two, of course, the demand side of the equation, and in particular, the developed nation, a billion people wanting to move out of poverty. Those factors will also impact the outlook.
Yeah. So, I think that supply chain and is going to be, by the way, I'm an economist by background, and I've never heard of the word transitory. So it's unprecedented for me. I don't even know what that is. I never studied it. Temporary inflation. I think the question is more, I fear more, are we in an inflationary environment or are we in a stagflation environment? And that's going to make the difference between capital transitioning from growth and tech seamlessly into value and cyclicals versus the whole thing crumbling down. And that's what I'm more focused on. I don't know whether we should be curious about trend. I don't know how you can tell whether we have inflation when you have this supply chain issue. You can't even bid on a good today to tell whether there's inflation because you don't know when the good is even going to arrive to you. So the chip issue, the supply chain issue are distorting our ability to understand whether we have inflation. And that is just a risk. It's a risk whether it is or not. And you have no choice what to do about that. But regardless, what we're finding is the appetite for energy globally is growing so immensely, both in the developed and the undeveloped world now. The attitude that we had pre-COVID was, move inner city, ride sharing, subway usage. Now it's the opposite. We're moving out. Everybody wants to take care of themselves. They want to look after themselves. No one wants to go grocery shopping. Instead, they want each of the individual items delivered to their door in its own individual package. All of this stuff, this selfishness, which is we've moved from selflessness to selfishness in a way that we're protecting ourselves and our health individually, is elevating the amount of demand for oil we're finding. And that's happening globally.
And so what do you think will be the result as it relates to the uptick that we've seen in the price of WTI? And also, of course, the stocks. Actually, before we even get to that, because we're going to talk about stocks later, but you used the word earlier, an energy crisis. It's pretty interesting to use those words. The last time you think of that would be in the 70s, and we're seeing it kind of play out in the UK and the EU. Describe to us maybe first, how did that happen?
Yeah, I think there's two crises happening. There's one in the developed world, which is a lack of the product to provide for basic travel and needs, and even to a certain degree heating. In the developing world, it goes even deeper. It goes into healthcare and life and survival, and both of them are situations where it happened because we attacked the short-term supply with North American oil, and we attacked the longer-term supply with the super majors starting 6-7 years ago. And those super majors reduced their spending by almost 60% over that period of time. And that infrastructure of 80 some odd million barrels of production that they were really responsible for maintaining has not been really maintained properly enough. And people just think we turn on a tap and we produce. It requires enormous amounts of capital. And I would even say that these OPEC nations that are supposed to be, we're all waiting for them to come back and show us all this oil when we need it. They're even panicking now because low oil prices meant they were not spending money on their own infrastructure. And that means that even their throughput that they claim they have is in jeopardy. And so for them to be saying they're going to be adding 400,000 barrels here right away, and then they're not going to look at it again for a while, they didn't raise production likely because they can't. And they've got to spend money on their fields, on their infrastructure to make sure they can have that capacity available.
Okay.
Because as soon as OPEC doesn't have the capacity, then we are in a free fall, or let's say a free rise up. And we are in a crisis situation.
We're going to pick that comment up right after the break. We'll be right back.
Okay.